Bob.
Which, Kath?
Flyers, the flyers to hand out to people saying join Rotary.
We haven't been back to the club there, but I can make a special excursion, I suppose, and retrieve them. Yeah.
You're going up on Saturday?
Yep, most certainly.
Yeah, I'll see you do it on Saturday.
Okay, I'll bring them then, Kath. Yeah.
Thanks, mate. That's great.
No problem.
That's all for me now.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah.
I'll mute myself.
Thanks.
Hey, Sarah.
Hi.
Great to see that you're able to get a leave pass, Sarah.
Yeah. Yes, we're not doing a meeting, surgical skills tonight.
Very good.
Very good. Very good.
Sarah.
Good to see you.
Sarah, it's
Yes.
Glenn here.
No, Glenn?
Can you check your account to see that you got a refund from me for refunding you the $35 for the Christmas due?
Okay. I'll hold it. When did you put it in?
3 hours ago.
Well, that might be hard.
What about the interest?
Lots of money.
So it should have gone into your, hopefully it was the right account.
Okay.
$35 about 4 o'clock.
Yeah, no worries. I'll have a look.
Does that include the interest that's accrued?
That's
$35.01.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's just about time to get the show on the road. Being 7:04, we're probably not going to get any more. If we do, well, they're welcome anyway. But look, welcome everyone, and it's great to see we've got 23 people, 23 Zoom connections, which equates to about 25 members at least. 26 members, I think, if Stan's there. Is Stan there, Pamela?
He'll be up from his office in a moment.
Right, okay, so that's about 26 members, so that's great to see.
That's not bad, yeah.
Okay. Tonight, as you're aware, we have a very special guest speaker.
Oh, yeah, gosh.
Quite special.
Which Bob will introduce later on.
Shortly, yes. So most of them will need to know him, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
That's right.
I'm sure you'll do a good job, Bob. Could we get started, please? Could I ask Gary Ryan to propose a toast to the people of Australia?
To the people of Australia.
Australia.
People of Australia. Here we all are. And Peter, do you have our international toast, please?
I sure do, Gary. The early 1800s saw a big move to finally abolish that evil trade of slavery in a number of countries. It's a process that took quite a long time. And in fact, it was on this day in 1865 that Abraham Lincoln finally signed the 13th Amendment to the US Constitution abolishing slavery. But much earlier than that, also on February 1, in 1835, slavery was abolished in Mauritius, an island in the Indian Ocean, and it was one of the first to actually abolish slavery. It should have happened so much earlier. There are actually about 9 Rotary clubs in Mauritius, and the one that we're going to be toasting tonight is a bit of a mouthful. It's the Rotary Club of Beau-Bassin. That's Bassin - Rose Hill. So Beau-Bassin, Rose Hill, and they were chartered in 1989. So our toast is to the Rotary Club of Beau-Bassin, Rose Hill in Mauritius.
Rotary Club of Beau-Bassin, Rose Hill.
Tom.
I'll send you the spelling later.
President Gary.
Yes, Pete.
A little fun fact there, when Peter's talking about slavery and everyone's talking about the United States ending slavery in 1865, in fact, Brazil was the last country in the Americas to abolish slavery, and that was about 20 years later. A lot of people don't know that.
Yes.
Yeah, it took a long time. There's a lot of action in the UK in the early 1800s, sort of abolitionists and the emancipation people trying to get rid of it.
The biggest slave trader was actually the Royal Navy.
Yep.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, Bristol has a bad name for slavery, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Indeed.
All right.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Peter. I'll leave it to Susan to talk about Australia Day. just as a bit of a wash up from there. Then I'll leave it to Drew to talk about the dues which have been paid. Everything's going well there. I don't know that there's any other exciting things that I need to report, but I'll ask the directors to do that as we go through. So, Susan, would you like to talk about Australia Day?
Thank you, President Garry. Yes, I would. I'd like to say thank you very much to everyone who came and did their little bit. It was fantastic. It was everything that the committee had hoped it would be. The weather was good. Wendy Dolan had said that it would be 40 degrees because Rotary was back in Glenbrook Park. So I'm glad that prediction of hers didn't come true. We got rid of about 450 sausages. We gave away at the end of the day for a donation to Tonga 2 loaves of bread, and we put 50 sausages in the freezer at St John's Road. I think you all look spectacular in your green and gold shirts. There were lots of positive comments, along with the "where are the gnomes" comments. I wish we'd thought a bit more earlier and to sort of say to people, where did you read about it or hear about it, so that we could be sure it was not just coming from the website or the Telegraph's article, but a few of us thought about it too late in the day. And but once it was explained to people that why we weren't having the gnomes, it didn't go down too badly, but I just wish that information hadn't happened. The little black ducks were fantastic.
Amazing.
Yeah, and they voluntarily stayed after we paid them from 8 till 10. And just as we were doing, and I spoke to them about me using their microphone for the acknowledgement to country, and if they'd play something while I took the flag up to give to President Garry. And they were very pleased to be asked to do that. And then they said to me when I came back from handing the flag over, after the flag ceremony, we'll stay for a little longer. Is that all right? So that was wonderful. I'd like to suggest that perhaps we put them forward for a Pride of Workmanship Award.
Yeah,
if
terrific.
there's still time to do that.
Great thought, Susan.
Yeah. And I don't know, do they have a hat out at the markets? Do they busk at the markets, or?
I have their guitar case open and coins in.
But, they don't have to come, and they don't have to be as professional as they are. And I sent them copies of the photos that Bob had taken of them, and I wrote them a thank you note, and we got a lovely letter back from all of them. So that went really well. So I just like to, and Drew says that we got $922 odd in the donation bucket. And looking at the reports that have come in from the other clubs that were at pools and Wentworth Falls Lakes, they didn't get as much money. And I think that the fact that we put on the Tongan appeal on our buckets, they just had Rotary projects. And I think that having a specific project on that bucket was a really good move. A couple of people, when I was standing in line waiting to get my sausage roll, said to me, what's the money going to? And I said, the Tongan relief. And one man had $5 in his hand, and he gave it back to his wife and said, give me the 20.
Oh, yeah.
That's great.
So, yeah, so there were a few learnings out of that, and we'll have a debrief, but I'd like to wait till Frank's back from the UK to have the debrief, seeing as he's the community service director.
Yep.
So again, I'd just like to say thank you very much to everyone who came, everyone who worked, whether you did an hour or 2 hours or were there all day. You did what you could do, and no one got sick. Everyone drank lots of water or sat in the shade. So well done, and thank you very much.
Well
Thanks,
done.
Susan. Okay. Now, the next big thing, of course, is the markets. Ken, do you want to say a few words about the markets on Saturday?
Yeah, thank you, Garry. Am I coming across all right?
Yep.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, okay. Yes, well, it's on again, and this hot weather will be finished. We're told that it's going to be a cool change over the weekend, which will be pleasant, as long as it doesn't have any wet stuff in amongst it. That'll be even better. But I think Kathy has been looking at the stallholder recruitment and can tell us how they're going. If you'd like to have a quick word, Kathy, with the numbers for stallholders.
It's still quite a small market this time. We've had a few the regulars not coming, maybe half a dozen, maybe 4 or 5. Some I'm not sure are going to come back. I think there's 1 or 2 I question mark, like whether they're going to come back at all. But other than that, it's been fairly positive. There's about 15 casual store holders. Garry tells me that the casual store holders dribble through right to the very end, so I'm still waiting for a few more to come. But look, the first market's always been quite a small market anyway, and I think this will be no exception. But things have been going really smoothly, and I'm pretty happy with the way they're going. Yeah, I'm actually just updating some stuff now while we speak.
Yep, okay.
Couple more
That's
holidays.
great.
So, yeah, a few of our storeholders too are having trouble getting staffing because of COVID. So, you know, the normal stuff that everyone's experiencing, they're experiencing.
Okay, well, it probably is going to be a good thing that it's a little bit smaller,
Yeah,
the first one back, and with a little bit of COVID scare around, being a little bit less crowded on our part probably isn't going to be a bad thing.
No.
So that's good. You'll notice the roster has gone out. We don't need quite as many people to help because of the decision not to have people at the welcome gates, but the tables will be put out with QR codes if people want to use those. And we will be giving the stallholders an opportunity to use QR codes too. So we're doing what we can there to help that happen. A few of us are going up on Friday afternoon to set up all the signage that we need, and that'll hopefully set the thing up properly for Saturday. And as I said before, unfortunately, I won't be able to be there this time, but I'll manage to. Thanks very much, Garry.
Thanks, Ken. All the best, mate. Thank you. Anyone have any questions of Ken? All good? Thank you.
Only perhaps, Garry, to ask again, is it too late to have folk on the gates if we can find a couple of people prepared? I'm certainly prepared to go on the gates for a couple of hours and take a collection bucket. Given what we raised on Australia Day, it seems rather careless to miss that opportunity. Plus, we need the PR impact on the gates too, I think.
Look, if people want to do that, I don't see any problem with that at all. It's just that I think I got the message from the board clearly not to roster people on, so we haven't done that. I think it's nice for someone to be at the gate and be able to welcome people and answer questions and so on. Anyway, I'm sure we'll get by however that works.
Yep.
Thanks, Ken.
Yep. Okay. Drew, do you want to mention how we're going with our with the dues and all that sort of stuff, please?
Thanks very much, President Garry. Nothing to report. I reported last time that everybody had paid their dues. We've now paid all the RI dues, district and RDU payments have been made. Susan underestimated the amount that we raised. It was 992, and I've got the buckets for collection, so I'll take them along on Friday afternoon. So if there is somebody wanting to collect for Tonga, we've got at least a bucket for each gate to do that.
Thanks, Drew.
Thanks, Drew. Okay. Okay, are there any other directors who would like to make any announcements? Roger? Nothing? Okay.
Garry, I might like to add in there that we've had advice today. I shared it with you and Michelle. I think that the next Foundation movie night's now been announced, and we have the Duke back again. We have a very wide window of opportunity to screen it. So we won't be in a hurry. We'll allow the current situation to evolve, I think, with COVID. But I think we can, and I'd need to check, but I think that note I sent Gary said that we could do it right through till the end of March, I think. So
yeah, that's good.
We'll wait for a while till the next board meeting and see how we feel. But
yeah,
it will certainly be a big attraction. I can confirm that our Penrith City Council inspection tour has now been locked in for June 14. So you might like to put that in your diaries now. Ed Klim is hurrying along the vocational awards on March 8. We've just had that suggestion from Susan on the Black Ducks, and we can push that through. I think you've all had a copy of the nom form, so please feel free to get those in ASAP. Joe Suka tells me he's working on the Western Sydney Airport night for February 22nd, I think, which will be a great attraction. So it's all going well. We've got our speakers, of course, appearing like the one tonight, and not too far down the track, we have the legendary John Wakefield scheduled to speak. That's almost as good as having John Wayne here, so you can really look forward to that.
Sounds great. Thanks, Bob. Could I ask Pamela to give us an update on where things are up to with Rotary Recycles, please, Pamela?
Thank you very much. We had a very good week, nicely air conditioned. A couple of those days we didn't need to put it on, which was quite eco-smart thinking. And Monday was actually a fairly quiet day, first for a long time, but we believe that's due to day before school going back and just not enough people around, and the afternoon was quite hot. So all in all, the first week back and the Monday was very successful. Terrific comments as to the resetting of the venue. Various people have come in that have been long-standing customers, and their comments were just so positive. It was great. Yeah, so very good. We've got a couple of spaces for DMs going away for holidays after maybe 2.5 years. I've lost count, but we've successfully trained some up-and-coming day managers that have returned to the role and are very keen to take on the square process, and that's really, really exciting. Proud of you, and they're so competent, and they love working with Rotary, so it's a win-win. Yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah,
terrific. Thanks, Pamela.
Thank you, President Garry.
Does anyone else have any comments they'd like to make before we move on to our guest speaker? Everyone happy? Bob, over to you.
Thank you, President Garry. It gives me great delight to do this little task tonight. Most of you are aware that the idea of this segment at regular intervals is to make sure that our all club members, not just our newer ones, but are refreshed in their minds and memories about the service that many of us have had behind the scenes in our working careers. And it's most appropriate this evening that we have our current leader, Garry Smith, in the hot seat, so to speak. But Gary's enjoyed a great career, and I'm sure many of you would know, but it may not, that he has a long period of service in the electrical supply industry as an engineer. And of course, one of the great things of that is the fact that he was able to spread his wings throughout country in New South Wales, from places, I think, from Tamworth down to Wagga. So, and then, of course, Yass and back to us, all with a close experience in ensuring that our state has an efficient electrical supply. And that's not always an easy task, as I'm sure Garry will share with you. But Garry came back to the Blue Mountains with his intention to retire here, and his dear wife Jen have built a lovely home. And they are quite settled, and he just can't quite get the golf game right. That's his big problem. But Garry, we'd love to hear from you. Over to you, my friend.
Thanks, Bob. Michelle is going to run the PowerPoint that I've produced. Are we good to go, Michelle? Do I have to do anything?
No. Don't touch anything.
I'm not touching anything.
All right, when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay, put your finger up when you want me to.
I've got a calendar on my screen.
Nice calendar.
Oh, have you?
Love the calendar.
It's a pretty crappy. Hang on, kids. Hang on.
Kids.
Okay.
Have we got it now?
Yeah. What you didn't know about Garry Smith, or something you may have forgotten. Right now, as Bob said, I've been in the electricity industry all my working life and had a fantastic career from my perspective. And but one of the highlights of it, which some of you may be aware of, is the fact that we spent, when I say we, I mean my family and I, we spent 15 months living in Hanoi in Vietnam. And that's why I've got the hat on. So could you go to the next slide, please, Michelle?
Yep.
I'd like to wish you all Chúc Mừng Năm Mới for 2022, which is the Vietnamese Lunar New Year, or Tet, where we farewell the year of the ox and welcome in the year of the tiger. I'm sure those of us who are of my tender age would remember the Tet Offensive back in 1969, I think it was, when the North Vietnamese overran most of Vietnam for a little while. And none of us really knew what Tet was in those days, but it's basically the Vietnamese New Year. And today is the Vietnamese New Year. So it's Chúc Mừng Năm Mới. Move on, please. Just a brief history of my life. I was raised in Fairfield. Started work as a trainee draftsman in 65 and graduated as an engineer in 75. Now that doesn't mean it took me 10 years to get there, because part of that was doing electrical engineering certificate course before I did the electrical engineering diploma at the New South Wales Institute of Technology, which our friend Brian Bonham also attended on, I seem to remember. Then we went off to Tamworth for a couple of years, then to Wagga for 10 years, Orange for 10 years. And it was during the time in Orange that we went to Vietnam, and that's what I'm concentrating on tonight. So I'll move right along to there. We moved back to Sydney in 97, where I joined up with Rotary for the first time, and then went to YAS for 2001 to 2009 to retirement. So that's a brief overview of my working life. The Vietnam project is something that it really was a fantastic thing from a professional point of view. I had been involved with the construction of the Mount Piper Marul and 500 kV transmission line. That's 500,000 volt transmission line. And for those of you who have been west, like as you're going over Mount Lambie, the Mount Piper to Maroon line crosses the highway just near Mount Lambie, just before you get into Lithgow. And that line was built from about 93 to 92. And at the end of that project, I got a phone call one day from one of the guys in head office. He said, how would you like to go to Vietnam? I said, what? And the organisation had been given the opportunity to send someone to Vietnam to help the Vietnamese government with a power line project that they had planned. And it was the biggest project since the American War, or as we know it, the Vietnam War. It was a fantastic project, and it was in conjunction with the State Electricity Commission of Victoria. And so there was one guy from SECV and myself from what was then Pacific Power International. And we were based in Hanoi. Like Jen and the children came over. The children started out doing distance learning from Dubbo for a while when we first arrived. But within a very short period of time, we realised it just wasn't going to work because anything that came in that was on cassettes, which is everything was on cassettes in those days, had to go through the Ministry of Culture. And it was taking weeks and weeks and weeks before we got anything back because they wanted to make sure it wasn't subversive information. So the children ended up going to the international school in Hanoi, which was the best thing that could have happened.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Jen ended up getting a job teaching there for a while doing music. And she also did some work on the project, teaching some of the operators conversational English. Most of them could speak English, but they had no idea what Australians were talking about. Thanks, Michelle. Just to give you an overview, I'm sure many of you by now have been to Vietnam, but in 1993, I don't think I knew anyone who'd been there. We lived in Hanoi, which is up there in the north. As you well know, Ho Chi Minh City or Saigon is down in the south, and the problem that the Vietnamese government had was that the Russians, during the period of 20 years since the war, the Russians had been building power stations, hydro power stations up in the north, and there was an excess of generation in the north, and they were having rolling blackouts in Ho Chi Minh City. So the biggest city was hamstrung because they didn't have enough electricity. So the plan was to build a 500,000 volt line from west of Hanoi in the north, all the way down the skinny centre of the country, down to Pleiku in the Central Highlands, and to Phu Lam just outside of Ho Chi Minh City. And that was supposed to be done within 12 months. Now, just to put it into perspective, it's about a 2,000 kilometre, the country's 2,000 kilometres long, which is about from Brisbane to Melbourne, right? Now, the transmission line was 1,500 kilometres long. It's about Coffs Harbour to Melbourne. And the Mount Piper Marulan line, which I had just finished being involved with the construction of, that was about 150 kilometres long, and that took 2 years. So, the thought of building a 1,500 kilometre line in 12 months was staggering. But the Vietnamese government were just totally undaunted. They had 4 construction companies, all competing. I mean, it's the most capitalistic communist country I've ever been involved with. And they had 15,000 people working on the project. So this was the biggest project, as I say, since the American War. And can you move to the next one, please, Michelle? Right. Okay. Look. Can you go to the next one, and then I'll come back. This was the structure of the project, right? So the Prime Minister was in charge, and there were 2 organisations within the government: the Ministry of Energy and the State Level Acceptance Council. They looked after the quality of the project, while the Ministry of Energy had the building and commissioning of the project. But our involvement, as you can see at the bottom there, was to provide input to both of those organisations, both of those arms, when and where we could, to assist with experts from Australia to be able to help them make sure that the main contractor, the main supplier of the equipment, which was a company called Merlin-Gerin from France, they had won the contract to supply all of the equipment and the design. Now, the design was basically an overall design. The Vietnamese construction companies had to do a lot of the local design, but our role was to make sure that they were getting what they were paying for. If you like, we were there to keep the bastards honest. And it was a daunting task, because the project managers from Merlin-Gerin, a French company, the arrogant French were alive and well, let me tell you. But we managed to have a great relationship with all parties, particularly the Vietnamese. The Vietnamese were very impressed with the way that we handled our involvement, and the way that we provided specialists when and where required. And over the time, I think we had something like 50 specialist people from Victoria and from New South Wales who were over there at various times, at the crucial times, to make sure that what they were getting was going to be suitable for the purpose. And that was the main issue, that we actually identified a number of things that just weren't fit for purpose. They were, like I'm sure has happened in lots of developing countries, they get given stuff because the country who's providing it maybe hasn't got a use for it, and they can see how they can get rid of it for a good price to someone who doesn't quite know what they're getting. So our involvement, as I say, was to make sure that they got what they were paying for. Can you just go back one, please, Michelle? So we arrived in Hanoi on the 1st of April 1993, a very auspicious date, April Fool's Day. And I thought to myself, this is not going to end well. The completion date was set for the 30th of April 1994. And I've already mentioned that the project logic, there were five 500 to 220 kV substations. One at the power station, of course, the hydro power station. I think there were six turbo generators on the hydro station, all built by the Russians. And I think the last two had only just been commissioned very recently when we got there. 1,500 kilometres to 500 kV lines and 15,000 people on the project. Just flick through two, please, Michelle. Now, this is the sort of country, for those of you who have been to Vietnam, will know that it's a great rice growing country, very mountainous. And at the time we were there, which, as I say, it stretched from sort of Brisbane to Melbourne, there were 70 million people in Vietnam at that stage. And in the middle of Vietnam, it's only 80 kilometres wide. So it's, most of the people either live in the north or the south. And there's now well over 100 million people. So they're certainly packed in there. But there's lots of places where you can go where there's just not a lot of people. And I saw a lot of the country. I was very fortunate. I was able to go to sites all up and down the countryside, which foreigners never get to go to. So I was very, very fortunate. Just go to the next one, please, Michelle. This is a typical strain structure or a tension tower. These tension towers, as you can see, are used when you have to change the direction of the line. So you have to take the tension of the line and then move off into another direction. And I'll talk about some of the basic engineering stuff without wanting to bore anyone. Can you just move to the next one, please, Michelle? Now, this is a typical foundation site for a tower, right? Now, here in Australia, when we put up a tension tower, we have fancy survey methods, and we bore a hole down at the angle of the tower leg, and set it, and it's all set by theodolite, and everything's beautifully construction with a cylindrical reinforcing mesh with the tower leg going down into it. So everything's perfect. Whereas in Vietnam, they had none of that sort of technology. They weren't comfortable with being able to get cement and concrete and aggregate and everything else to the sites, because some of the sites were only accessible, and I say many of the sites were only accessible by manual labour and horse and cart. So they had to build everything. They had to build every site was a flat site. So there were no sloping sites where they had different height legs. All the legs had to be the same height. So you can see, and there was something like 3,480 tower sites. So you can imagine that's a lot of holes full of a lot of concrete. Now the concrete was mixed on site with local aggregate. So when you look at the sort of different aggregates that we use here, that's the stones that go in the cement mix. Like over there, they were just boulders. But they over-engineered everything to make sure it'd work, which is what it has. We go to the next one, please, Michelle. Now, that's not a Dalek. It's a series capacitor on a 500 kV line because of the fact that they had to, it's a long, skinny system. There's all sorts of fancy like electrical things that have to make the system operate correctly. And part of that was just, look, I won't bore you with that. That's a series capacitor. Yes. Next one, please. Part of my job was talking to people, and going to sites, particularly with the guy in the yellow hat. That's Mr. Hua, and Mr. Hua was one of the few people that I met in Vietnam who was willing to make a decision. Most people in Vietnam, their culture is that every decision is a committee decision, so no one's held responsible. But it was very difficult to get things done without someone making a decision. And Mr. Hua was the man who was prepared to do that. Mr. Hua is a very interesting character. I had a great relationship with him. And as things have transpired, his son and his son's wife and children now live in Sydney, and we keep in close contact with them. Unfortunately, Mr. Hua died probably 10, 15 years ago, but absolute wonderful gentleman. Go to the next one, please. And of course, lots of long lunches. Long lunches in out of the way places, dished up food that I'm just not quite sure what some of it was, but I know it tasted good. and washed down with copious quantities of vodka and beer and all sorts of other things. So it was all a wonderful time. Next one, please. As I said on one of those slides there, the Prime Minister was the commander-in-chief, if you like, of the project. And about 3 months out, so about Christmas time, I guess, maybe January, February, we got this summons from the Prime Minister's office. Could we come to dinner? And the Prime Minister, we all sat down around a big table, as you do, and the Prime Minister said to me, he said, "Mr. Smith, is it going to work?" This was the biggest concern that they had, was that they'd spent all this money and they wanted to make sure that it was going to work. And of course, what do you do when you're asked that by the Prime Minister? All you can do is say that, with the wonderful expertise of the Vietnamese construction companies and the Ministry of Energy and the assistance of the Australian side, of course it will work, Mr. Prime Minister. Next one, please. So the target date was set when we got closer to was for the 19th of May. Now, the 19th of May was a very auspicious date in the Vietnamese calendar because that was Uncle Ho's birthday. So all the stops were pulled out to make sure that the first energisation of the line, of a section of the line at 500,000 volts, was going to be on the 19th of May. And as we got closer and closer to it, we could see that there were still problems that had to be addressed and tests that had to be carried out and completed and everything else. And so we had to make the management board aware that they weren't going to make the 19th of May, but we would in fact make the 20th of May. So reluctantly they said, okay, we'll make the 20th of May. And the 20th of May, as many of you all know, is my birthday. So they didn't get Uncle Ho, but they got me. And I got the biggest sheet of flowers I think I've ever seen in my life. The work was completed through to Ho Chi Minh City by the end of June. That's the commissioning work. So each section of line was energised, section by section to make sure everything was working correctly. And of course, as a result of all that, we had other projects that flowed from it. We had further transmission line projects, further substation projects, and a major power station project, which with people from the generation companies in New South Wales were involved in for about the next 10 years. So we had staff in Vietnam up until 2005. So all in all, it was a fantastic project, which I'm very, very proud to say that I was involved in at the start. We had 4 or 5 other people who went over in subsequent years to take the role that I'd had. And then, as I say, lots of other people who work in the power station sector. Okay, Michelle. Questions? Does anyone have any questions?
Great work, Gary. That's inspirational address. Thank you very, very much. Now, folks, there must be a dozen questions out of that. I'll throw on the pot first up, Garry. Was there any anti-feeling as a result of the war still or not? Had that all subsided?
Well, Bob, in answer to your question, no.
Mm.
No, not at all. But the American embargo was still in place, right? And of course, because they knew that we were from Australia, and because they knew that Australia had been in the war, but had always handled ourselves extremely well, and they were very, very conscious of the Australians, because most of the people who we were dealing with in the senior echelon of the government, they'd all been in the war.
Yeah.
And in fact, in Hanoi, as many of you may well know, that the bridges across the Red River, the Americans bombed those bridges mercilessly, and of course the Vietnamese would put them back up again. And it wasn't until the Vietnamese realised that if they put some of the US POWs working on the bridges, the Americans stopped bombing them. So, you know, using a bit of psychology. And so no, Bob, we didn't have any issues whatsoever. It was a great relationship.
Thanks, Garry. Further questions, people?
Hello.
Peter?
Garry, having also been to Vietnam and seen what the countryside is like, how do you accurately quantify and cost a project of that complexity? Just looking at one slide there of a piece of equipment, the capacitor, I'm thinking, how on earth do you cost this across such a huge distance? Just a major exercise.
Yes, indeed it is. It was, and the answer to that question is that was all part of the design that the French company won the tender for.
Right.
So they tended to provide all of the equipment that was required. Right. So and it was a major logistical exercise. The cable came from the Ukraine. There was equipment from Canada, equipment from Japan, equipment from China. All over the world provided the equipment to be able to get it done in such a short time frame, because the lead time on some of that stuff is quite long. You know, the transformers, for instance, came from Schneider in Germany, I think. Right, and you know they had to be specially designed for that particular system. So yeah, it was a major logistical exercise.
Thank you. Further.
Was it Frank Kelly? I think Frank, Bob.
Yep, thanks.
Michelle.
Yep, Garry, if you were doing that project today, would there be much different in the process?
Frank, look, probably not a great deal, Frank. The Vietnamese government, I'm sure, has probably changed significantly since my time over there, but it's still the same culture. And I'd be surprised if it has changed much. But look, the Vietnamese people, like the Chinese people in most Asian countries, they are extremely pragmatic when it comes to getting things done. And they can make, you know, that they have people power to make sure that these things are done in a way that we wouldn't even comprehend, and we wouldn't put people at the risk that they do. Michelle, did you have a question?
I'm just looking. Any other questions, guys?
Yes.
Oh, Ken Linfoot, sorry.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, Garry. Great presentation, mate. Something I'm sure you're very, very proud of, having been there. Look, I'm just interested in the pragmatism that you ascribe to the Vietnamese with the history of the French in Vietnam. I was a bit surprised to hear you say that they were the major contracting company for the project, if I got that right. So that history was no barrier when it came to getting the job done.
That's that's correct, Ken. They look to where they can get the best bang for their buck, basically. But that's why the organisation that was responsible for the quality of the project wanted to make sure that they had some outside involvement to make sure that what they were getting was going to be fit for purpose. And that was really our main involvement, was to make sure that we were able to allay those concerns.
That's smart.
Yeah.
Further questions?
Bruce?
Yes, Garry. Given the range of workforce and the range of geographical locations, there must have been I guess a few sleepless nights on safety matters, especially if you're mixing concrete in awkward locations of all shapes and sizes.
Frank, sorry, Bruce. Bruce, the first site that I ever went to, I think, was the power station site west of Hanoi, and the Vietnamese construction companies had moved one half of the mountain to build a substation on. Now, you know, the rock face where they'd been digging out was, you know, probably, I don't know, 75, 80 degrees. And, you know, very, very steep. And there's people up there in bare feet and sandals with picks and shovels and, you know, unbelievable. And, you know, one of the questions I asked them the first day I went there, I said, what sort of safety record do you have? And the guy who was in charge of construction said, we've had one man cut his foot. And I thought, that sounds like a highly optimistic thing to me. But anyway, you know, whether they were covering things up, I'm not aware of anyone who died on the project, and I'm sure we would have heard it had they have.
Yeah.
But certainly it was it was of great concern to me on various occasions. But that wasn't our role. That was, you know, the Vietnamese construction companies had the responsibility for those sort of things.
Have we got time for one more, Bob?
Yeah, one more question, please.
Ian?
If any.
You'll have to unmute yourself, son.
President Garry, are you going to tell us about what that capacitor was doing? Why you had to have it?
Look, in simple terms, Ian, a long transmission line actually generates voltage because of the relationship of the phases. So you end up with a higher voltage at the end than what you had at the receiving end to what you had at the sending end. And so those series capacitors were basically there to, you know, to equalise the voltage in simple terms. Yeah. I am not a system designer or a system studies person, and probably one of the things that I was chosen for was because I was more of a generalist type person, whereas the people who I arranged to come over to help out with a lot of the various things from system studies all the way to communications and design and equipment and protection and various other things, they were all specialists. Right? So my role was very much a generalist role, to be able to identify the people and the opportunities when we needed to bring people in to assist.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Garry, we can't thank you enough. That's been a splendid program. There you are, folks. You don't need any more proof than that of the people that are within our club that have done so much with their lives that we all need to share. So a round of applause, please, for Garry.
Thanks,
and
Bob.
I would remind you that in just a month's time, two of our new members, Ian Chappell and Bob Allen, will give an insight into their lives, but we should be back at the club by then. We'll have a full program with the two newbies sharing the spotlights. So we can look forward to that. Okay, back to you. Thanks, Mr. President.
Thanks very much, Bob. Can I just put on my other hat? Just hang on, I'll put on my other hat.
You can.
Doesn't matter. Where am I? Here I am. My Vietnamese hat.
Your Vietnamese hat. That's
My
very
Vietnamese
impressive.
wedding hat. So I'm prepared for anything, and I've even look if we ever get around to having a fancy dress party, I've also got a suit that goes with this. So there you go.
That'll be perfect. We'll look forward to that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Okay, well, next week, for those of you who have read the note that I put out, next week we're back at the club, and we are going to have, as well as a face-to-face meeting, we're going to run Zoom for those who don't feel comfortable coming to the meeting. We don't want to exclude everyone. We want to give everyone the opportunity to come to be involved in the meeting. So there's a few things that we need to do. We need to sort out what we're going to do on the door, and what we have to do with paying on the square. Meals, as you know, meals are going to be paid for by each of us by ordering at the counter. Is there anything else I've forgotten?
I think we need to try and get the membership there a little earlier if we can, Gary. That they should, rather than rock in at 7 o'clock or 5 to 7, I think 6:30 would be a good.
Yeah, well, 6. Well, I mean, it is 6:30 for 7, and let's
right.
Get people there earlier rather than later. That will give people an opportunity to order their meal and all that sort of stuff.
And they still have to record their names with Terry, of course.
Yes. Okay. Well, look, Terry will put out his normal note asking for nominations. Yeah. Okay. Okay. We're all good. So next week we have the man from the Bendigo Bank, Bernard Feehan from the Bendigo Bank, coming to talk to us, and that will be at our face-to-face meeting at the club.
Excellent.
So that's great. All good. Have I forgotten anything, Michelle?
No, I think you've covered it. All good.
I've nailed it.
Only the final "Who am I?" if you wish.
You want to? Who am I, Bob? Okay. Right.
Yeah, an easy one tonight, folks. So, Michelle, you watch for the hands, please. No singing out. Just raise the hand. You are reminded, of course, that Drew has a valuable prize for you each when we're back at the club. I think Susan has one to collect from last week. So it's all going well. She was born in New Zealand in 1944. Her real parents were unmarried. Shock horror. And she was put up for adoption. She was encouraged from a very early age to explore her musical talents.
Kiri Takanawa.
You've ruined it, you know.
Sorry.
Just pretend we didn't hear it. Just pretend we didn't hear it. Keep going.
She moved to England at the age of 22 to study at the London Opera, a decision of the Royal Opera House. In 1967, now you might know this, you met her Australian husband on a blind date. They have 2 children, both adopted. In 1971, she was cast as the Countess in The Marriage of Figaro. At 3 hours' notice, she once took the lead role in Othello. That'd be no mean feat. She was made a dame in 1982, and she sang at the wedding of Prince Charles and Diana Spencer. Thank you. Well done, Peter.
I knew it.
Okay.
1944.
Did you? So did you know it, Frank?
Oh,
yes,
of course he did.
Yes, I did. As soon as you said 1944.
Yeah, so did Jennifer.
And Stanley's got his hand up.
Yeah. Anyway, all good. All good. Thank you very much, Bob.
Pleasure.
They're being...
And Drew?
And Drew. Drew, you've got a comment?
Just one thing with the door, the meeters and greeters, can they make sure that they know who they are because we'd like to start the training on the new process with people. So if I could, have the roster and make contact with them, could they be there at 6:15 so that we can initiate the process training?
Good thought, Drew. Yep.
Drew, I will send a message to Christina because I need her to give me intro people and thankers, and I'll get her to touch base with all the people on top of it.
Yeah. So, Drew, I presume you want me to bring the square on, right? Yeah. Okay. Well,
with or without the Green Street Gate keys.
No one's up. Well, look, I've spoken to Wendy, and she's going to contact me when she's down here next, and I'll give it to her then.
I'm going to save this up for a fine next week. The explanation of that little conversation with Garry. So bring your money with you, Garry.
Feel free, Susan. No problems, no problems. Okay, we all good?
Very good.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming, and we look forward to seeing you all again next week. Well, if we don't see you at the markets, we'll see you next week.
That's right. Thanks, President Gary. All
Good
the
night,
best.
Sue. Good night, Billy Bob.
Bye.
Hi, everyone.
Bye, John.
Bye.